In today's world where everyone fights to be heard, what if your greatest power is saying nothing and letting silence do the work? Society tells us you must prove yourself constantly, but what if being underestimated is not a curse, but the ultimate advantage? We glorify loudness, confrontation, and instant recognition. But what if the quiet ones, the patient strategists, are the ones who always end up 10 steps ahead? Welcome to StoicCraft, the channel where ancient Stoic wisdom meets modern reality. Here you'll learn how to turn silence into strength, underestimation into strategy, and discipline into destiny. This isn't about empty quotes or fleeting motivation. It's about real tools for building emotional intelligence, psychological resilience, and unshakable self-mastery. They thought you were blind. They thought you were naive. They assumed you didn't catch the sarcasm laced in their tone, the subtle insults behind their carefully constructed smiles, or the manipulations buried in casual words. They laughed privately, certain they were smarter, convinced you were too slow, too unaware, too trusting to see the game being played right in front of you. But here's the truth. They never saw coming. You noticed everything. Every sideways glance, every half-smile that carried contempt, every word chosen less to communicate and more to control. You saw it all. And sometimes the most dangerous strategy is not to fight back, but to act as if you don't notice. Play along. Because what they didn't understand is that silence isn't always weakness, and patience isn't passivity. Sometimes it is the sharpest form of power. This is what the Stoics understood thousands of years ago. Silence and patience are weapons. By pretending not to notice, you gave them rope, and they used it to hang themselves. Believing you were harmless, they grew bold. They bragged too loudly. They underestimated your awareness and exposed their arrogance without realizing it. What they thought was hidden became obvious, and every careless move was revealed in plain sight. While they believed they were writing your story, they were only drafting the script for their own downfall. They didn't know that playing dumb isn't ignorance. It's a calculated act of emotional intelligence, psychological strategy, and spiritual discipline combined. It's how you protect your peace, guard your energy, and prepare for the long game. And now that moment has arrived. They finally see it. You weren't the fool, you were the architect. You were never behind. You were always 10 steps ahead. And that realization burns deeper than anything you could have shouted in your defense. Because this isn't about revenge, it's about control. It's about patience. It's about mastering yourself so fully that no insult can provoke you. No manipulation can drag you into chaos, and no one can touch your inner calm. They thought your silence meant weakness. Now they know your silence was the win. Most people hate being underestimated. They take it as an insult, a direct attack on their intelligence, their worth, their dignity. Their instinct is to correct the wrecked chord, to argue back, to prove themselves, to demand recognition. But here lies the paradox. When others underestimate you, they hand you the sharpest weapon you could ever carry. Being underestimated is not a curse, it is camouflage. It's the cloak that allows you to move without resistance, to watch without being guarded against, to position yourself while others dismiss you. And for those who follow the Stoic path, this cloak is not just protection, it is power. The illusion of weakness is a strategic advantage. Think about what happens when someone dismisses you. They stop paying close attention. They lower their guard. They relax in your presence because they think you are harmless. That illusion of weakness becomes the opening, the crack in their armor. Enemies who see you as strong prepare for battle. Enemies who see you as weak make themselves vulnerable. They speak more freely. They reveal intentions they should have kept hidden. They grow careless in their arrogance, and there you are, silent, patient, composed, the unseen strategist. This is emotional intelligence at work. Not every insult requires a reaction. Not every provocation deserves your energy. Sometimes the highest form of dominance is restraint. Restraint becomes the battlefield, and silence becomes the blade. The Stoics taught that control begins with perception. When others underestimate you, they aren't just dismissing you, they are revealing themselves. They show you who they are when they believe you're not paying attention. And that is why being underestimated is a weapon. Every arrogant word, every careless action, every motive they thought was hidden comes pouring out. And the one who collects the most information, the one who listens more than they speak, ultimately holds the real power. In silence, you gather data. In patience, you build clarity. This is psychological discipline at its highest form. You no longer react to what they want you to feel. You observe, analyze, and strengthen your position. Here's the trap they fall into. Arrogance blinds. When someone thinks they're superior, they stop questioning themselves. They assume victory before the battle begins. And in that arrogance, they get sloppy. By letting others underestimate you, you set a trap that requires no anger, no argument, only their own ego. The louder they boast, the deeper they step into the snare. They mistake your silence for ignorance, when in truth it is quiet confidence. Confidence so steady it doesn't need validation, because it already knows how the game ends. The Stoics remind us, the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And when your enemy is arrogant and careless, your greatest weapon is not confrontation, it is patience. Most people chase recognition in the moment. They want to win the argument now, to prove themselves immediately. But the Stoic understands the greater truth. Real victory is not in winning a single round, it's in winning the war. By letting them underestimate you, you buy time. Time to read the room. Time to see every angle. Time to prepare the move that ends the game permanently, not temporarily. This is the mindset of strength-delayed gratification. Strategic patience, the willingness to sacrifice the moment for the outcome. That matters most. You don't need to respond to their taunts or defend against their accusations. You wait. You let reality itself expose them. And when that realization finally dawns, when they see you were never blind, never naive, the blow lands harder than anything you could have said, because the most powerful truths don't come from you proving them. They come from time itself revealing them. It was never about you being blind. It was about them refusing to see. Their own behavior became the evidence that betrayed them. Every sarcastic remark, every manipulative twist of words, every smug little smile that once made them feel superior, now it all returns like ghosts they cannot silence. What they thought was victory, they now see was illusion. The truth catches up with them. And the truth is this: you were ahead the entire time. This is Stoic revenge in its purest form, not by shouting, not by exposing, not by fighting for validation, but by stepping aside and letting them walk straight into their own downfall. Why is being underestimated such a weapon? Because it changes the entire structure of the game. When someone underestimates you, they remove pressure from your shoulders. You no longer have to prove yourself to them. You are free to protect your self-worth without exhausting yourself in endless explanations. You gain space to observe, to grow, to build your strength in silence. And most importantly, control shifts. The one who underestimates loses clarity. They become blinded by their arrogance. Meanwhile, the one who accepts underestimation as strategy gains freedom. Freedom to observe without being watched. Freedom to prepare while the other grows careless. Freedom to let truth reveal itself in time without you having to waste a single word. That is the Stoic path, not chasing every insult, not defending against every accusation, not burning yourself out fighting battles that don't deserve your energy. Instead, you turn the insult into armor. You turn the dismissal into strategy. You turn silence into victory. Being underestimated is not weakness, it is advantage. It is a weapon that only the disciplined can wield. Because when they think you are powerless, you are at your strongest. When they think you are blind, you see the clearest. And when they think they are winning, you are already 10 steps ahead. The moment they realize this is the moment their facade collapses, and you don't need to utter a word. You've already won. Silence unsettles people in ways that words never could. We live in a world addicted to noise, addicted to reactions, addicted to constant displays of power. That's why silence is so disruptive. It throws the arrogant off balance. It makes the manipulative reckless. It sets the perfect trap. Here's the psychology of silence. Most people confuse silence with ignorance. They think that if you are not speaking, you are not thinking. If you're not reacting, you're not aware. But the truth is the opposite. When you remain silent, you are observing more closely than anyone else. Silence disarms because it denies the manipulator what they crave most, your emotional energy. Manipulators feed on outrage. Narcissists thrive on attention. Toxic people feel powerful only when they can provoke a reaction. But when you respond with calm restraint, when you give them nothing, you create a void they cannot control. That void grows louder with time. It becomes more suffocating than any confrontation. It forces them to talk more, to reveal more, to desperately fill the silence with words that betray them. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects back their insecurity, their arrogance, their hidden motives. This is how the trap works. The more comfortable they feel underestimating you, the more careless they become. They let their guard down. They think you're harmless, clueless. And in that false confidence, they expose themselves. It's like a hunter watching prey walk freely into the open, unaware of the danger. They only realize too late that every step was leading them closer to the snare. That's the power of silence. Every sarcastic remark, every manipulative attempt, every secret they share while dismissing you, it all becomes ammunition. And you don't need to chase them. You don't need to prove a thing. You simply let them walk deeper into the trap they set for themselves. Silence is not passive. It is active strategy. When you choose not to respond, you're not doing nothing. You're gathering intelligence. This is emotional intelligence at its highest form. By holding back, you create space to observe. You notice the tone shifts. You catch the inconsistencies. You see motives hidden between lines. Most people miss these details because they are too busy reacting. But the one who speaks less sees more. The one who waits longer knows more. And the one who knows more always holds the power. This is where the psychological breakdown begins. At first, your silence makes them confident. They mistake it for weakness. But as time passes, doubt begins to creep in. They start asking themselves, "Why didn't you react? What did you notice? What do you know?" And that tiny seed of doubt grows into fear. Every moment of your silence becomes heavier, more unsettling, more threatening. The irony is this: what once made them feel powerful, your lack of reaction now makes them paranoid. They replay conversations in their mind. They recall times they thought they had fooled you, and suddenly they are no longer certain. This is psychological warfare in its purest form. Without raising your voice, without lifting a hand, you turn their own mind into their enemy. But here's the challenge. Silence isn't easy. It requires spiritual discipline and strong psychological boundaries. Our natural instinct is to defend, to clap back, to correct the lies. But the Stoic understands a truth most people overlook. The first reaction is rarely the wisest one. By restraining the impulse to react, you prove mastery over yourself. You show that your peace, your worth, your energy are not negotiable. And that realization terrifies people far more than anger ever could. Because when they see they cannot provoke you, they realize they cannot control you. The bigger picture is this: the silence trap isn't about humiliating others or making them suffer. It is about protecting your inner peace while letting the truth surface naturally. When someone underestimates you, silence buys you time. Time to understand, time to plan, time to prepare for the long game. When the truth finally reveals itself, you don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't even need to confront. The realization falls on them like a storm they never prepared for. That is why silence is more powerful than confrontation. Confrontation might let you win an argument, but silence wins the war. Silence isn't weakness. It is a battlefield they cannot see. It's the invisible ground where you gather strength, where you watch every move, where you collect intelligence patiently and let them undo themselves with their own words and actions. When you embrace silence as strategy, you stop playing by their rules. You force them to collapse without you ever raising your voice. They thought your quiet meant ignorance. They thought your patience meant surrender. But in reality, your silence was the weapon that would corrode them from within. And by the time they realized it, the damage was done. It was too late. Here's the harsh truth. Arrogance is nothing more than weakness pretending to be strength. When someone convinces themselves that they are smarter, faster, more cunning than you, they stop seeing the danger in their own reflection. They crown themselves as the master of the game, but in truth, they are blind to the trap they've already stepped into. This is the illusion of superiority, and it is one of the most destructive forces in human behavior. Superiority creates a false reality. The arrogant convince themselves that the upper hand is theirs by default. They speak over you. They mock your restraint. They laugh at your silence. They believe you are beneath them, and in that belief they let down their guard. They no longer scan for threats because in their mind there are none. They underestimate your patience, your discipline, and your emotional intelligence. They assume the game is already won, and it is in that overconfidence that they become careless. The irony is sharp. The more superior they feel, the more vulnerable they actually become. The Stoics warned us, ego is the silent enemy. Ego is the enemy of reason, the destroyer of clarity. When pride inflates, wisdom collapses. And in that collapse, people reveal their weakest points. By playing along, by nodding when they expect argument, by listening when they expect resistance, you give their ego the room it craves. And the more it grows, the less it sees. Once blinded by arrogance, they expose themselves. They reveal secrets they should have guarded. They make moves they should have hidden. They laugh when silence would have protected them. Their ego, not your hand, becomes the architect of their downfall. This is psychological discipline at work. You aren't battling them directly. You're simply letting their ego fight itself. They thought they were the king on the chessboard, but the truth they never saw coming is this. They were never the king. They were the pawn, and pawns don't decide the ending of the game. Every smug remark, every sarcastic jab, every manipulative move they made while underestimating you, it wasn't victory. It was wasted energy. Worse, it was evidence. Without knowing it, they wrote the record of their own weakness while you stood quietly, collecting it all. And when the day of realization arrives, when the illusion shatters, it's devastating. They finally see the truth. They were never the master of the game. They were the pawn all along. The psychological cost of that realization is heavy. It's not just embarrassment, it's devastation. Because they are forced to face the truth that every win they celebrated was false. Every time they believed they fooled you, they were fooling themselves. Every time they mocked your silence, you were quietly recording the truth. Every time they thought you were naive, you were already ahead. Behavior so subtle that most people miss them entirely. While they believe your silence means you are weak, you are in fact building an archive of truths. That is why silence is not emptiness, it is strategy. Each sarcastic comment they think slipped past you is stored. Each inconsistency in their words is noted. Each manipulative tactic is carefully filed away in your inner library of understanding. Over time, what they mocked as ignorance becomes revealed as intelligence. You hold more than words, you hold evidence. And evidence, when the time comes, is leverage. Here's one of the oldest laws of power. The one who holds the most information wins. The same principle applies in war, in politics, in business, and in relationships. The battle is rarely won by brute strength alone. It is won by the one who knows the most, who understands the terrain, who reads the timing, who knows the opponent better than the opponent knows themselves. By refusing to reveal what you know, you force the other side to reveal themselves. By staying silent, you widen the gap between what you see and what they believe you see. And that gap, that chasm of awareness, is your greatest advantage. This is why emotional intelligence is not about being nice. It is about being aware. It is about knowing when to speak, what to say, and most importantly, when to say absolutely nothing. Because silence is not absence. It is the breeding ground of clarity. Here's the danger of speaking too soon. The moment you react, you give away information. You reveal what triggered you. You show where your boundaries are. You make visible the exact points they can exploit. And manipulators are just quickly covering their tracks, hiding their motives, shielding their weaknesses. But when you remain silent, they believe their mask still works. They think they are safe. They think you didn't notice. And so they keep talking, keep acting, keep exposing. Every second of silence is another opportunity for them to reveal themselves. They bury themselves with their own words while you simply observe. This is restraint as spiritual discipline, the discipline to value truth over ego, patience over impulse. And in the end, this discipline is what separates the strategist from the victim. The victim reacts, the strategist watches. The victim defends themselves. The strategist collects information and strengthens their position. When the day of realization comes, it is not your words that crush them. It is the knowledge you hold. They suddenly remember the smirk they thought you missed, the insults they believed you ignored, the manipulations they assumed were hidden. And then it hits them. You saw everything. That realization is devastating, because information, once revealed, cannot be denied. They cannot erase the evidence they exposed to you. They cannot undo the truth they confessed without even knowing it. The awareness gnaws at them. They recognize they were never in control. You were. This is Stoic revenge at its highest form. Not revenge through retaliation, but revenge through awareness. Not through shouting, but through patience. Not through chaos, but through the long game. Most people fight to win today, to win the moment. The Stoic fights to win tomorrow, to win permanently. Information is the key to the long game. It allows you to predict moves before they happen, to anticipate reactions before they unfold, and to time your response with precision. It allows you to strike not in anger, but in certainty. This is the high-performance mindset. Don't waste energy proving yourself in the moment. Invest energy in preparing to win forever. The real strength of holding information is restraint. Anyone can talk, anyone can react, but very few can stay silent when underestimated, and fewer still can maintain composure while they quietly hold the truth in their hands. When you hold information, you hold control not just over them, but over yourself. You are no longer tossed around by provocation. You are guided by reason, by strategy, by clarity. That is not simply power over others, it is emotional mastery. Information is not just knowledge, it is freedom. It frees you from blind reactions. It frees you from manipulation. It frees you from wasting energy on petty battles. By staying silent. You gathered what they thought was hidden. By waiting, you transformed their arrogance into evidence. By holding back, you gained the greatest advantage any person can have, clarity. And when clarity is yours, victory is already written, because in every conflict, the one who knows more has already secured the outcome. There is always a moment sudden, sharp, undeniable, when the mask slips. When the arrogant finally understands that every smirk, every insult, every clever little move was never hidden from you, that you were never naive, that you were never behind, that you saw it all, and by the time that realization comes crashing down, it is already too late. At first, they laughed at your silence. They mistook your patience for ignorance. They believed you were the fool. But now, looking back, the truth is like a storm breaking open the sky. Every time they thought you were lost, you were already ahead. Every time they believed they had fooled you, you were watching, waiting, calculating. This is the devastating power of emotional intelligence. It doesn't confront in the heat of the moment. It doesn't need applause. It waits. It watches. And when the truth is finally revealed, it arrives not as noise, but as inevitability. That is why the deepest wound isn't carved by your words. It is carved by their own realization. They weren't proving you wrong all along. They were proving themselves wrong. All along, you weren't simply enduring, you were setting the board. This is the essence of Stoic revenge. Not revenge driven by anger, but revenge born of patience. You allowed them to tie the knots, thinking they were binding you when in truth they were weaving their own trap. And now, standing caught in the web of their own making, they finally see the truth. They were never the master of the game. They were the pawn. And pawns don't get to decide the ending. Nothing wounds the ego more than self-exposure. Had you shouted, confronted, or argued, they would have had room to deny, to fight back, to defend their pride. But you gave them none of that. You stayed silent. You simply observed. You let their arrogance grow unchecked. And now, as the illusion collapses, they are left naked before the truth. Their downfall is not your doing, it is their own. That is why the realization cuts so deep. It is not that you outmaneuvered them in one heated moment. It is that you outmaneuvered them across time. Every careless word, every arrogant smirk, every attempt at manipulation, all of it was another step closer to their own undoing. And when the reckoning arrives, there is no escape. This is the silent punishment. Here is where your discipline shines the brightest. You don't need to say, "I knew it." You don't need to humiliate them. You don't need an audience, because silence itself is the harsher punishment. When realization happens, in private, when there is no crowd to console them, they are left alone with the weight of the truth. They replay the conversations. They remember your calm nods, your quiet eyes, your refusal to react. And suddenly those silences become heavy with meaning. That understanding haunts them because arguments fade, but internal truth lingers forever. The Stoics taught that some battles are best won by never fighting them at all. This is that teaching in practice. You didn't waste energy defending yourself against every insult. You didn't drain yourself with petty conflicts. Instead, you played the long game. And in the long game, victory is not noisy. It is quiet. It is watching them self-destruct while you protect your inner calm. True power doesn't rush. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't beg for recognition. It waits. It allows time to deliver the punishment that anger never could. And then comes the psychological aftermath. They hesitate before speaking to you. Their tone changes. Their words soften. They carefully avoid certain topics because now they know you see through them. They may never admit it out loud because pride is stubborn, but their behavior betrays them. They carry the weight of underestimating you every time they stand in your presence. That is the permanent scar of this realization. It rewires how they see you, no longer the fool, no longer the easy target. Now, in their mind, you are the strategist they cannot provoke, cannot manipulate. cannot control. By the time realization dawns, it is too late. The damage is permanent. They thought they were playing you, but you were always playing them. They thought they were ahead, but you were always in control. This is the quiet victory the Stoics revered: winning without noise, conquering without a fight, standing tall without ever sacrificing your calm. Life, after all, is not a boxing ring. It is a chessboard. The loudest punch might win a round, but only the most calculated move wins the game. Those who rush to prove themselves are playing checkers fast, impulsive, reckless. Those who embrace patience and foresight are playing chess. And in chess, the one who sees 10 moves ahead always wins. Most people live only for the short term. They crave the thrill of the clapback, the satisfaction of the instant victory. But short-term victories often create long-term losses. The Stoic sees further. He doesn't play for applause, he plays for inevitability. On the chessboard of life, every silence is a move. Every observation is a calculation. Every act of restraint is a repositioning of the pieces. While others exhaust themselves attacking, you conserve strength. You wait for the decisive strike. Sacrifice the small win today for the ultimate victory tomorrow. That is the high-performance mindset. Here's what the arrogant never grasp. When they underestimated you, they saw you as nothing more than a pawn, disposable, insignificant, beneath notice. But the pawn, with patience, advances step by step, quiet, unnoticed. And when the timing is right, the pawn transforms into a queen, the most powerful piece on the board. That transformation is your patience at work. What looked like weakness becomes dominance. What seemed like surrender becomes strategy. And by the time they realize it, it is too late. This is the essence of psychological boundaries. You refuse to let their perception define your reality. You know your worth even when they cannot see it. Patience is not passivity. Patience is active preparation. It is the discipline to hold your ground when every impulse screams at you to react. It is the inner strength to wait until the board is tilted entirely in your favor. Seneca wrote, "He who hurries delays the things of life." In other words, rushing is weakness. Restraint is power. When you wait, you are not idle, you are working. You map patterns. You test their moves. You allow them to believe they are in control while you are quietly adjusting the board. This is not weakness. This is emotional intelligence applied to its highest form, resisting the temptation to react in order to command the outcome. Because timing is everything. Even the strongest move fails if played too soon. Silence gives you timing. Silence forces them to reveal everything. Silence makes them exhaust themselves. And when the moment is right, you move once and the game ends. That is the beauty of Stoic strategy. You don't need to win every little skirmish. You only need to win once decisively. And patience guarantees that when you strike, it will be final. At first, your calm unnerves them. They interpret it as ignorance. But slowly unease creeps in. They realize they cannot provoke you, cannot rush you, cannot dictate your pace. That calm is not weakness, it is dominance. It signals that your inner peace cannot be touched. And when they see that they cannot control your reaction, they know they have lost their greatest weapon. This is spiritual discipline, mastering yourself so completely that no outside force can disturb your balance. That is the Stoic advantage. The impatient burn out, the arrogant collapse, the reckless expose themselves, but the patient endure. They outlast. They win without noise, without drama, without needing to prove a thing. That is why the chessboard of life belongs to you. Not because you move first, but because you move last. And the last move is the only one that truly matters. The chessboard teaches a simple truth. You don't need to dominate every moment. You only need to master yourself. When you resist the urge to rush, when you embrace silence as strategy, when you play the long game, you transform underestimation into inevitable victory. They thought you were the pawn, but patience revealed the truth. You were the queen all along, because the greatest battlefield is not the office, not the argument, not even the chessboard. It is the mind. The enemy is not just a manipulator across from you, but the impulse within you, the temptation to react, the craving to prove, the urge to fight when patience is the true weapon. Self-control is not just a Stoic principle. It is the foundation of victory in every arena of life. Without it, you are a slave to provocation. With it, you are untouchable. The first and most important battle is always against yourself. The Stoics understood a timeless truth. The first enemy you must conquer is yourself. If you cannot master your emotions, you will never master anything else. Self-control is not about pretending you feel nothing. It is about holding back when everything inside you wants to lash out. It is the quiet refusal to let someone else dictate your behavior. It is saying to the world, I am not governed by your chaos. I am governed by my own discipline. And this is what terrifies your opponents the most, not your strength, but your restraint. Why? Because reaction is the easiest thing to provoke. That's why toxic people bait you. They want you angry. They want you defensive. They want you emotional, because an emotional opponent is predictable. But when you refuse to react, you become unpredictable. You stop giving them the map to your mind. You keep your strategy locked away, and what they encounter is not an outburst, but a wall of calm. Your silence becomes their frustration. Your calm becomes their prison. That is emotional intelligence in practice, refusing to let external chaos infect your internal state. Most people still think power means control over others, but the Stoics flipped that idea on its head. True power is control over yourself. When you maintain composure, you radiate strength without needing to announce it. You reveal that your worth is not determined by either insult or applause. And here's the paradox. The less you react, the more control you gain over the situation. Because the first person to lose composure is the first person to lose control. Self-control is not suppression, it is mastery. It is not bottling up your emotions until you explode. It is the discipline to redirect your energy into strategy rather than waste it on impulse. Think of self-control as the quiet weapon. It does not need to raise its voice. It does not need to fight every battle. It does not need to win every argument. Its power is invisible, operating in the shadows while others burn themselves out proving points that do not matter. You conserve your strength for the only moments that truly count. The Stoics compared anger to fire. It burns bright, but it devours everything, including the one who carries it. Discipline, however, is steel. It does not burn. It does not bend. It endures. That is the difference between momentary fury and lasting power. And part of self-control is setting boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect yourself. Each time you refuse to react, you are declaring, "My peace is not for sale." My focus is not yours to control. My dignity is not yours to touch. These boundaries are invisible walls. They frustrate manipulators precisely because they cannot penetrate them. They cannot reach you because you no longer play on their level. This is spiritual discipline at its core, the work of building an inner fortress no external force can breach. Most people lose because they fight only for the moment. They want to win the argument, get the last word, earn the applause of the crowd. But the Stoic doesn't fight for applause. The Stoic fights for the long term. Self-control allows you to remain calm when others collapse, to think when others panic, to plan when others react blindly. And in the long game, the one who controls himself inevitably controls the outcome. Self-control is not just a moral virtue, it is the ultimate weapon. It is the shield that guards your peace, the sword that cuts through manipulation, and the anchor that holds you steady when the storm rages. When you master yourself, no insult can shake you. No provocation can dictate your choices. No arrogance can bend your will. That is why the discipline of self-control is not survival, it is dominance. Because in the end, the world does not belong to the loudest. It belongs to the calmest. The one who can wait, who can observe, who can act at the right moment and never sooner. Every pause, every silence, every moment of restraint builds toward one critical instant, the turning point. The moment when the balance of power shifts, when arrogance collapses, when patience finally reveals its reward. For so long, they believed you were behind. But without warning, they wake up to the truth you were ahead the entire time. Turning point never arrives suddenly. It is prepared in silence. Each time you refused to react, you were quietly stacking weight onto the moment that would come. Each sarcastic remark they threw at you became evidence. Each manipulative move became part of the pattern you recorded. This invisible archive of information is what transforms silence into strength. What looked like passivity was in reality preparation, and preparation always leads to inevitability. The breaking of the illusion comes when they finally connect the dots, when they look back and realize you weren't ignoring them, you were studying them. You weren't lost, you were calculating. You weren't weak, you were waiting. And in that instant, the illusion shatters. They see the truth. They were not the player, they were the piece. They thought they were leading the game when, in reality, they had been following your script all along. That is the devastating beauty of Stoic revenge. You don't fight for the reveal. Reality does the work for you, and it all rests on timing. Timing is everything. Speak too soon, and you lose your edge. React too fast, and you reveal your hand. But by holding back, you gave space for the truth to ripen. You allowed time itself to be your ally. And when the right moment finally comes, you don't need a speech. Sometimes one move, one truth, one calm look is enough to collapse everything they built on arrogance. That is why spiritual discipline matters. It gives you the patience to wait until the battlefield already belongs to you. And when that moment arrives, The shock is silent, but it is absolute. What makes the turning point so powerful is that you don't need to announce it. You don't need to say, "I told you so." You don't need to humiliate them in public. The realization alone is punishment enough. They see it in hindsight, when it's too late. They replay conversations, remembering the smirk in your silence that once seemed harmless. They recall how freely they revealed themselves, thinking you weren't paying attention. And now the weight of that memory crushes them. This is why the turning point is irreversible. Once they see it, they cannot unsee it. Once the illusion collapses, it cannot be rebuilt. After the turning point, everything changes, not because you demanded respect, but because they can no longer deny it. Their tone softens, their confidence cracks. They hesitate before speaking. They tread carefully, suddenly cautious, where they were once arrogant. And all the while, you remain as you always were, calm, steady, grounded. That contrast is what breaks them, realizing that while they wasted energy chasing false victories, you conserved your energy and waited for the inevitable. This is psychological boundaries at their strongest. You did not step into their chaos. You forced them to recognize your order. The turning point delivers a timeless, Stoic truth. Reality always reveals itself. You don't need to rush it. You don't need to force it. You simply need to let arrogance collapse under its own weight. And when it does, you don't just win, you transform. You move from underestimated to undeniable, from pawn to queen, from silence to unshuckable authority. The turning point is the great reversal, the moment the underestimated one becomes the undeniable force. It is the fruit of patience, the reward of restraint, the triumph of strategy over impulse. They thought you were playing dumb. They thought they had control. But when the truth surfaced, they saw the reality. You were never behind. You were always 10 steps ahead. And that moment marks the real end of the game, not for you, but for them. But Stoicism teaches us something deeper. The story doesn't end with their downfall. True victory is not revenge. True victory is transcendence, because revenge still ties you to them. Peace sets you free. At first glance, it feels satisfying to watch their arrogance collapse, to see them stumble into their own downfall. But satisfaction is not the same as fulfillment. The Stoics remind us, if your victory depends on their defeat, then your freedom is still chained to their existence. You are still reacting, still playing their game, even after they've lost. The real victory is choosing not to need revenge at all, to let them carry their own burden while you walk forward unshaken. This is the power of inner peace. By refusing to chase revenge, you protect your greatest treasure, yourself. Revenge consumes energy. Peace conserves it. Revenge ties you to the past. Peace carries you into the future. Revenge feeds the ego. Peace strengthens the soul. Spiritual discipline is knowing that you don't need to win twice. The moment they exposed themselves, you had already won. Anything more is wasted energy. Living beyond revenge means turning pain into growth. Their underestimation became your training ground for emotional intelligence. Their manipulation sharpened your patience. Their arrogance became the mirror that reminded you of the dangers of pride. What they intended as harm became fuel for your evolution. And growth is the most permanent form of victory. letting go is freedom. When you rise beyond revenge, you are no longer tied to their mistakes. You don't wait for apologies. You don't crave recognition. You don't need them to admit defeat. Their acknowledgement is irrelevant. You saw the truth. You kept your dignity. You preserved your self-worth. That is enough. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to let bitterness poison your progress. Most people get trapped in endless cycles of retaliation, insult for insult, wound for wound. But when you live above that noise, you break the cycle. You stop reacting. You start living. Intentionally, you no longer waste yourself on small battles. You save your energy for the path that truly matters. And in doing so, you embody the highest form of strength, the ability to move on without crushing anyone beneath you. Living beyond revenge is the ultimate Stoic victory. Because revenge looks outward, peace looks inward. Revenge seeks validation. Peace requires none. Revenge wins the moment. Peace wins eternity. They may never forget the day they realized you were ahead all along, but you don't stay there. You step forward, lighter, freer, untethered. Because the greatest power is not in proving them wrong. The greatest power is in not needing. To be underestimated is not an insult. It is an opportunity. It is the silent advantage life gives only to the patient, the disciplined, and the wise. Every time they thought you were weak, you were gathering strength. Every time they thought you were blind, you were seeing more clearly than they ever could. Every time they thought you were behind, you were already 10 steps ahead. And that legacy, the legacy of being underestimated, and turning it into mastery is what carries you forward, long after the game is finished. Being underestimated is not a curse. It is a hidden gift. It frees you from pressure. It allows you to move in silence, without resistance, without suspicion. And from that freedom, you build not only victories, but a life of unshakable peace. When people dismiss you, they stop guarding themselves. They stop preparing for you. And in that gap of arrogance, you find your advantage. That is why being underestimated is not your enemy. It is your weapon. It gives you time, space, and freedom to build something far greater than they could ever. Imagine, from pawn to architect, that is the story of silence. It is not just about patience. It is about transformation. At first, they saw you as a pawn, moving quietly, seemingly powerless, beneath notice. But what they never realized was that you were not playing their game at all. You were building your own. Through restraint, you became the architect of outcomes. Through patience, you became the designer of the board itself. And through self-control, you became the master of timing. This is a high-performance mindset at its peak, not reacting to the present, but creating the future. And though they may never say it aloud, because pride will keep their lips sealed, they will never forget. They will remember the silence that once made them feel powerful, now haunting them as proof of their arrogance. They will remember the smirk they thought you missed, now etched into their conscience as a reminder of their downfall. And most of all, they will remember that in the very moment they thought they were winning, you were already scripting their defeat. That memory is the shadow they cannot escape, but your true legacy is not their regret. Your legacy is your growth. You emerge from their games, not bitter, but stronger, not reactive, but intentional, not broken, but unshakable. Your silence gave you emotional intelligence. Your patience gave you inner peace. Your restraint gave you spiritual discipline. And your journey gave you a self-worth that can never again be stolen. This is the hidden gift of being underestimated. It forces you to master yourself. And once you master yourself, you stop fearing underestimation, because you know it is always the beginning of your advantage. The Stoics did not measure victory in applause, in recognition, or in the defeat of others. They measured it in freedom, the freedom to remain calm in chaos, the freedom to choose peace over provocation, the freedom to be underestimated and yet still rise above. Your legacy mirrors theirs, not noise but stillness, not revenge but clarity, not temporary wins but permanent strength. Being underestimated was never a curse. It was the foundation of your power. It was the silence that sharpened your vision, the patience that fortified your soul, and the restraint that made your victory inevitable. They thought you were playing dumb, but the truth is you were writing history. And now, as they carry the weight of their miscalculation, you carry the legacy of silence turned into strength, of patience turned into power, of discipline turned into destiny. That is the true victory, not the fall of your enemies, but the rise of yourself. They thought your silence was weakness. They thought your patience was ignorance. They thought your humility was submission. But now they finally see the truth. Your silence was strategy. Your patience was power. Your humility was discipline. You didn't just win, you transcended. You rose above their arrogance, their manipulation, their illusions. And in the end, they were forced to face the most painful truth of all. While they underestimated you, you were already building the path to victory. That is the Stoic way. Not revenge, not noise, but strength in stillness, clarity in silence, freedom in restraint. And here's what you must remember. This isn't just their story, it's yours. Every time someone underestimates you, every time they misjudge your quiet, every time they dismiss your worth, you hold the power. Because silence, when used with wisdom, is not absence. It is presence. Not defeat, it is strategy. So ask yourself, how will you use it? Will you waste energy proving yourself in the moment, or will you master the long game? Will you fight every petty battle, or will you choose the war that truly matters? Because the legacy of being underestimated has never been about them. It has always been about you, about your emotional intelligence, about your inner peace, about your spiritual discipline, about the self-worth no one can strip away. And if these words stirred something deep within you, if you felt the strength of silence, the power of patience, the certainty of being 10 steps ahead, then this is your moment. Subscribe now. Join this journey of Stoic wisdom, psychological strategy, and unshakable strength. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? And did you turn it into your advantage? Because in the end, the game is never about proving them wrong. The game is about proving yourself right. And once you master that you've already won, now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated, and did you find a way to turn it into your advantage? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else break free from the same trap. And if you're ready to go deeper, Check out our StoicCraft playlist on emotional strength and strategic silence, a series of lessons designed to help you protect your peace, sharpen your discipline, and stay 10 moves ahead in life's battles.